one on and one off will be good. Right. This is the third part of what we're looking at, of trying to look at from an intellectual standpoint, logically, does it make sense to believe in a creator? And I want to thank you for those of you who have suffered through the first two sessions, the last 2 weeks. I know they were probably boring. The best I could say for them is they were dry as a bone, I know that, but I trust that you know that they were very, very necessary and important to set the stage for what we're going to do. It gets a little more interesting today, maybe just a little bit more fun, as we, having set that foundation, as to we start looking at the four major questions, the way I've broken things up, that we need to look at. And pardon me 1 second while I make some AV adjustments, so we don't blow everybody out who tries to listen to this later. Thank you. And as Kurt mentioned, if you do want to pick these up later on, or you've got somebody you want to go back and critique them, I hope you will. That would be great. I'd love to talk with any of you one-on-one if you have some further questions, or if you want to say, I don't understand that, or if you want to say, I don't think that was quite right. I welcome any of the above. We're moving so fast, we don't have a whole lot of time for back and forth in class, or we'll never cover it. But I do want that, and I would just be happy to take time, and I would enjoy any of you if you have something like that. So please feel free to approach me with that. Kurt mentioned, and the first two are on there, that the exact title for how you would look at it is on the board there. If you're one of the people seeing this on YouTube, you already know that, so I won't say it any further. Just a couple of things from the first 2 weeks. Won't go back and review, but I want to say 2 or 3 things that will take us into our discussion today. We've kind of looked at the idea that none of us need to make any premature conclusions or to conclude without considering things, whether there might be a creator or whether there might not be. Okay, that's a very important question. It deserves serious consideration, and I don't want to assume the answer to be either yes or no, and I don't want anybody else to do that either. So I think we need to consider things fairly and just as intellectually honestly as we can. We talked about some ways to do that, and one of them being that we need to seriously consider, give critical analysis and fair consideration to any seriously proposed hypothesis. Okay, and then let them stand or fall based on the merits of them as we examine them. You can't refuse to consider something and claim to be actually looking for the truth. We also looked at some ways to do that, and that'll come back up again. Kind of a method for going through things. We'll look at that again in a moment. And the idea, too, that if any hypothesis or theory, idea, whatever you want to call it, if it is just not compatible with evidence, common sense, and I mean well-applied common sense, if something just does not make sense and you realize it just really can't be true, you need to throw it out, no matter what it is, and no matter whether it was your preferred theory or what. If it's just not sensible and it's not true, you need to be ready to throw it out and then go back to the best, most sensible theory that you have remaining, or keep looking, or something, okay? So that's kind of what brought us to where we are today. And we also looked at the idea that there will be things that are beyond human grasp and beyond human ability to measure. That does not mean that they cannot be true, and you'll find things both theistic and atheistic that fall in that category. That doesn't mean they can't be true. We're all going to have to figure out, we're going to have to arrive at some conclusion that is beyond human grasp. All right, so let's get into that. So this is kind of the method we looked at. Have to consider, all seriously proposed hypotheses have to be considered. If you can conduct an experiment and do direct testing, I will say that is the gold standard, the scientific method, as truly defined. That's what you ought to do in any case where you can. If you cannot do that, can you directly observe things, even if you can't control the experiment? Can you directly see it in real time happening and evaluate evidence that way? Sometimes you can. And if you cannot do that, you look at all the evidence that you can gather from every source. So we kind of went through that. And if some of you think that it may be helpful, I will produce and would be happy to hand out some incremental notes as we go. But some of you could maybe tell me whether you would want to do that or not. I won't waste the paper if it's kind of not useful, but let me know if some of this would be helpful. All right, so as we get into the first question then, how did all of the matter and energy in the universe come to appear? How did that happen? Well, let's define this, because a lot of times nobody really stops to define this, and I think we have to. We say, well, I know there's a God. Well, okay, define that, please, so we can have something to compare here. So let's define a creation theory or an intelligent design or superior entity, God, whatever term you want to use. I'm fine with any of that. We're talking respectfully on all sides here, so I'm okay with any of that. Okay, here's the hypothesis, as I would propose it for you, that there is a supernatural that is beyond human and our physical existence, a supernatural, eternally existing entity. And again, we said before, the concept of eternity is impossible for humans to truly grasp. We can talk about it, we can describe it, but I can guarantee you that no human mind, no matter what you believe about things, is capable of truly fathoming the concept of something being eternal. All right? Again, we'll talk about it, whether we understand it or not. Okay? So that there's an eternally existing entity that created all that physically exists in this universe. Okay? And this entity created, therefore, the laws of nature, the laws of physics, and therefore this entity alone has the power to override them if desired. Daniel pointed out very correctly last week, okay, I think we can all agree that the laws of nature or laws of physics, whatever you want to call them collectively, are not violated in the world that we see. And if I tell you that they are, either I'm lying or mistaken, or if indeed it can be documented beyond any doubt that the laws of physics or nature were violated, that by definition is a miracle. That would be pretty much the definition of a miracle, something that could not happen unless it happened by the action of such an entity that can actually control laws of physics. Now, you may not like that hypothesis. That's fine. I respect that. You may say, no, there could not be any such being as that. You may not like the hypothesis, but that's the hypothesis. All right? You got to consider it, whether you like it or not. And I also have to consider, whether I like it or not, that such an entity may not exist. Just being fair. All right, so I just want to know that we have kind of a definition. And please keep that in mind. Now, this hypothesis, whether you think it's true or not, and that's what we're going to try to examine, it is seriously proposed. This is not some whimsical belief, all right? Millions, maybe billions at this point, of people throughout history and in the present age have staked their life on the belief that there is such an entity. And they have gone to their death for the belief that there is such an entity, all right? So, yeah, this is a seriously proposed. This is not something that somebody thought up as a joke. Oh, yeah, I'm going to make up, we're going to call him God, But, this is not some character. You know that. This proposed entity is defined, like we just said. Okay, now you may not have ever thought about that in so many words before, but that's kind of the definition of what we would call this entity. All right, and I'll say it now. We're not depending on it at the moment, but there are thousands of people who have given, you might say, sworn or under oath or under penalty of death, even testimony that they have had interactions with such an entity. All right, so that doesn't make it true, but it makes it worthy of serious consideration, and I hope everybody could agree on that. It meets the criteria for possible credibility that needs to be examined. Now, I want to throw this out. Some of you may have heard of Richard Dawkins, a very prominent atheist philosopher, writer, etc. Very adamant about atheism. Very highly critical of anyone who believes in a God. But that doesn't make me any less interested in reading his writing. In fact, I've read a whole lot of his writing and watched many hours of his videos, etc. I want to know what he says. But one thing he says, making fun of anybody who believes in such a superior entity, is that he says it will be probably even more reasonable to believe in a flying spaghetti monster. All right? And so you'll see cartoon pictures of that. You know, yeah, he's a flying spaghetti monster, and he flies around, but he's invisible except when you want him to be visible. And he does things, okay, making fun of the idea that there could be any supernatural entity. But you know what? If he wanted to sign his name under penalty of perjury or penalty of death, and if he wanted to say, yes, there is a flying spaghetti monster, and I have seen him, her, whatever, then I'll consider it. And if he wants to define what that flying spaghetti monster is, then I'll give it fair consideration. Do you see the distinction? That's a pretty big distinction. So I'm not making fun of anybody's hypothesis, no matter what it is. I want to look at it. But number one, let's treat everybody with respect, and I expect to be treated the same way, at least to some degree. And let's look at apples and apples as best we can, okay? All right, so you just need to know some of what's out there. All right, so we come back to this. Now, again, don't let the thing, if you want this on paper, I'll be very happy to give it to you. But here's the way I've broken down the question into four major questions. Number one, the existence of all matter and energy in the universe. Number two, the precise structure and organization of the universe. Number three, the initial appearance of and survival of any kind of life on this planet, no matter how simple or complex. And number four, the diversity and complex and precision of life and function that we see all around us and in a human body as well. So those are the kind of the four questions, and I think that would probably pretty well cover it. Okay? Because each of those things needs to be explained and understood either because of a creator, superior entity, or without one. And that ought to give us a lot of answers if we can do that. So that's kind of where we are. Let's look at the very first of those questions then. The existence of all the matter and energy in the universe. Okay, so here are kind of our major theories to consider and compare. One is that there is a God, a superior entity who created this, the heavens and the earth. All right? That's a major theory. You can like it or not like it, but it deserves serious consideration. We talked about the fact, I'm not even going to give time to these, but there are, whimsical mythologies that there was, Zeus or whoever, and there are, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there's one that there was some Hindu entity, and he ate a big meal, and it didn't agree with him, and he belched, and out came the earth. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff like that. They are not seriously proposed, and so we're not going to give a lot of time to those. I'm also not going to give time to the flying spaghetti monster for the reasons that I said a moment ago. All right? Now, here's the kind of I put a double line there, theistic theories there on the left side and atheistic theories here. All right? The primary, at the moment, atheistic theory would be that there was a Big Bang that began the universe. We're going to talk about that. A very definite beginning, but there is no firm theory for what caused that Big Bang to occur. No prominent or prevailing theory for that. All right? Some older theories were that the universe itself has existed eternally in its more or less present form, kind of in a steady state. Another older theory was that the universe existed eternally in kind of a continuously oscillating state. That might be that there's a Big Bang, from a tiny point, and the universe expands out and forms. But almost like if I took a ball and I throw it in the air, it will accelerate for a little bit and it will slow down, and finally it will come to a point where it stops and falls again back to my hand. And then I could throw it up again. And so that's kind of the idea. The universe expands from a Big Bang. It reaches a certain point, and it kind of, it runs out of accelerate or velocity, and gravity then takes over, and it falls back in on itself this over a few billion years probably, et cetera. And then when it comes down and then bangs again. And you kind of get the picture there that, it's a continuously cycling thing happening for eternity, and we happen to be in one iteration of that. All right. I'd give serious thought to either one of those. And in fact, I want to thank my friend Daniel for putting me on to then going back and researching, et cetera, the reasons why these are really not held prominently anymore. First of all, and it's because of some really good scientific work, direct and indirect observation, especially through astronomy. And what I'll just tell you, just for the sake of brevity, because we've got so much to cram in a short period of time, these theories are not seriously held anymore. Just real quickly, in its steady state, well, it's not steady. The universe is expanding. And just very good scientific observation shows us that it is expanding, and therefore it can't have always been where it is because it's expanding. That means it started from somewhere, leading you back to something like a Big Bang theory. The oscillating theory also is not true, and again I want to thank Daniel for this, because my analogy with the ball, it starts accelerating, but then the acceleration slows down because of gravity, and then it falls back down. So if this were true, you would see that the expansion should be slowing down, if nothing else. But instead what's happening is the velocity of expansion of the universe is actually increasing. It's accelerating. And that tells you it didn't, it's not coming back in ever. All right, hopefully that makes sense just in quick. So those theories have kind of gone away. Here's an additional one from Stephen Hawking, that the universe spontaneously created itself, you might say. I'll show you a quote in just a moment. Or just spontaneously came into existence, however you want to say that. That is not widely held. Now, look, I'm not worried about how many people vote, that, yeah, I like that theory, or, okay, so I don't base things on a vote. But so that's not, I don't discount this because it's not widely held, not at all. But I will tell you that there are plenty of people who are peers of Professor Hawking who will also look at that. We're going to look at it more in just a minute and say, no, not going for that. So that is not the prevailing theory. All right, that gives you a little bit. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like a Big Bang theory because if you have a Big Bang, then that kind of still leaves you with the question, what caused it? All right, so, but let's just take the briefest look at what we're considering, the matter and energy in the universe. Just give you just a quick tour. Yes, Daniel.
Just to add on to that last slide, and I know I don't want to take up too much time. One other consideration I think Roger Penrose was a proponent of is, it's kind of complicated, but a conformal mapping from photons at infinity. If you look long enough in time after the decay of all matter, you can actually map that back to an infinitely small point of essentially creation of a new universe by transforming the photons across the full infinity of everything back to a single point from the math. It's really interesting, but just to throw that out.
Okay, all right. That's one I think, yeah.
That is still being considered.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. No, I would. It's really one-on-one, but yeah. And Roger Penrose was a contemporary and partner, you might say, of Stephen Hawking through almost all of his early work, et cetera. I think they parted ways on some things they didn't agree on later on, but a brilliant scientist. So I will look forward to hearing more about that. So, all right. Well, let's just give you a quick tour. What are we talking about? Universe? Is that a big deal? Are we talking about a lot here to come into existence? All right. So just for comparison. Typical human body mass, 70 kilograms. That's kind of considered the average adult, male or female, etc. I'm running about 80 kilograms right now. Should be closer to 78, but anyway, ladies, I know you're not one hair above 99 pounds at the most, so I wouldn't even question it. No, but that's a typical human. 100. That's your average adult human. All right. Well, if you take a fairly brief shower, you'll use about 60 to 80 kilograms of water during that shower. That's pretty heavy. That's a lot of water. Not all at once. You wouldn't want somebody to dump that on you all at once. But anyway, that's about how much water you would go through there, because water's kind of heavy. All right, well, let's compare that. How about a 2,000 square foot house with its contents? About 186,000 kilograms. Well, that's getting up to some weight, isn't it? All right. However, you can still build a machine that weighs more than your house and shove it through the air and land it, on the other side of the world, which is pretty amazing to me. But the heaviest airplane to date ever built and flown was a Russian cargo plane carrying a takeoff weight of 640,000 kilograms. So, wow, that's 3 times your average house. That's not bad, huh? Well, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of mass right there. Just as an aside, even the heaviest Boeing 747 doesn't even come close to that. It's only, 500,000 kilograms. Just, lift it with one finger. Yeah. The Empire State Building, about 331 million kilograms. The Earth is that many kilograms. It's a lot of zeros. It's a lot of mass. But guess what? As massive as, and you think about the weight of the oceans, and every single thing and every 7 billion people on this planet and the houses they live in and the mountains, okay? But that's nothing. The entire Earth starts looking like a grain of sand when you look at this. And I'm giving you only the briefest tour here. There's the sun, our sun. And they've moved it in real close so you can compare the size. That's the Earth. Okay. In reality, if you put it to scale, of course, it'd be they wouldn't be in the same frame. You see that? Our huge, massive Earth is nothing compared to our sun. All right, the mass of the Earth, as we showed you, is this many kilograms. I could tell you the number, but you can read it, and et cetera. But if you compare that, the sun actually is about 99.8% of the mass of our entire solar system. It has the mass of about 1/3 of a million Earths by mass. By size, it's 109 times the diameter of Earth, and by volume, it's 1.3 million Earths. The density is different, as you can see. Okay, well, that's pretty massive. It gets to the point where it just blows your mind. And hats off to some great scientific work that you can go look those facts up right now. But that's mass. Then that's just our solar system we looked at. What about power? Let me make sure I didn't skip a slide there. Yeah. Okay, well, what about energy? What about power? Well, the most powerful explosive that we know of ever detonated on this planet was a hydrogen bomb in the Soviet Union in 1960. I say they detonated it secretly. Yeah, because when you detonate something that size, you're not keeping it a secret. The world knows. All right. Had a yield of 50 megatons. That is just a comparison scale. The power of 50 million tons or 100 billion pounds of dynamite. 1,570 times the combined power of the 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan to end World War II. Okay, that's a human creation. Well, the bomb was a human creation. The hydrogen that powered it, well, we had that to work with already. Well, that's pretty powerful, isn't it? And you've seen the old black and white footage of what one much smaller atomic bomb did to an entire city. And thank goodness it's never been done again since then, dropped on a human population. All right, well, guess what? The sun emits as much power as nearly 2 billion of those bombs every single second. That's some power, isn't it? if you want to look at that later, you can have fun with the computations on how it does that. Okay, but just so you don't get worried about that, the Earth only gets about 1/5 billionth of that, so that's good. Otherwise, it would really be toasty in here. Boy, that's a lot of power, isn't it? But that's one star. That's our sun. If you get somewhere where there's a dark sky and you look up at night, that's what you see. It's hard to see that around here. But that's just a look out at part of our Milky Way galaxy. You see why somebody called it the Milky Way? And I am grateful once again to Daniel for guiding some of my flailing, sophomoric questions about our galaxy, etc. But if you've ever looked at, photographs of various nebula where there are huge clouds of gas, you might say, when I say huge, I mean they're light years across, etc., forming new stars every day, new stars forming. But look, okay, when in the stories recorded in the Old Testament, when Abraham, was told, look at the stars, or look, etc., he's not seeing what we see in a night sky is amazing enough. Look at that, all right? But that's just what we can see with the naked eye of our part of the galaxy. Our entire galaxy looks a lot like that, or at least if we could stand outside it and photograph it, we think that's what it would look like, a spiral galaxy, and we happen to be kind of out on, fairly far out on one of the little peripheral arms of the galaxy. If we were closer into the middle of the galaxy, we would not exist, because if you were much closer in it, all the radiation and heat would make all life impossible. Unbelievable, okay? And we're one little solar system out on the fringe of that. But that's just one galaxy. That's just our galaxy, massive as that is. About 300 billion stars, we believe, but that puts us kind of on the small side of galaxies. The average galaxy, probably closer to 700 billion stars. So we're kind of a small player, among galaxies here. But just to tell you, our nearest neighbor in this galaxy, our nearest star neighbor, about 4.3 light years away, and that's how many miles one light year is. Our nearest star neighbor is about 24 trillion miles away from us. Even the light takes 4.3 years to reach us. And the Milky Way, our little galaxy, about 106,000 light years across. Unbelievable. But that's just our galaxy. And some years back, the Hubble Space Telescope, they decided, I guess somebody, got a few hours of telescope time and decided, instead of looking at stuff, let's just prove, let's look at the empty part of the sky. The part where, you're looking out away from our galaxy and we just don't see anything out there. Let's just point it out there and do like a long time exposure photograph, where you leave the camera open instead of like that for a long time. So what they did was point it at the empty section of the sky for about 100 hours. And there's the time exposure photograph that was seen. You realize those are galaxies. And so, based on some really good science, what we now know is there's probably about 100 billion galaxies. Each one, on average, 700 billion stars, many with planets, etc. So that's about 70 billion trillion stars. The nearest galaxy to ours is about 25,000 light years away. And in fact, Daniel did tell me it happens to be moving a little closer to us just because of our trajectories. So lay awake tonight and worry about that. Yeah, it'll be one big happy family at some point. Actually, they might pass through each other almost, but with some significant disruption. Okay, just a quick tour. Man, we're talking about some huge stuff. You talk about the existence of that much matter and energy. This is no small question. So let's come back to our competing theories for how that might have happened. All right? First of all, I'm going to take that one that was on the far right, that the universe spontaneously created itself. All right? Proposed by Stephen Hawking and his later writing partner. This was Leonard Mlodinow. I'm probably saying it wrong. There's the book in 2010. Professor Hawking says, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation. Now, you'll notice Professor Hawking is never in doubt about being right. Whether he's right or not, he's never in doubt that he's right, okay? So he's going to tell you what happened. All right, spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing. Why the universe exists, why we exist. It all spontaneously came into being or created itself, he's saying. He says it is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper. That's British. What he means is like the dynamite fuse. He said you don't need a God, to light the fuse and get the thing going. It'll happen by itself because there's a law such as gravity. That's a pretty bold statement. All right? A lot of his peers said, yeah, that's nice. Professor Hawking needs to sell books, and that was a good way to sell books. Okay, well, look, I'm going to take what he's saying seriously. But yeah, that's a pretty bold statement. Well, let's think about a hypothesis scorecard for that then. Is direct experimental testing possible, like we looked at a couple of weeks ago? That would be the ideal. Conduct an experiment. And by strictest definition, if you can't do that, it's not science. Can you conduct an experiment to test his hypothesis? No, I don't think so. All right, well, if that's not possible, can you directly observe it happening in real time? No, I wasn't there. Whatever happened, I wasn't there. Can't do that. All right, well, if none of that is possible, then we don't have direct observation. Is it compatible with observed phenomena, the laws of physics that we know? Well, are you aware of things creating themselves spontaneously? Look, and I don't mean to be derisive against Professor Hawking's idea here, but quite seriously. Of course, you can't create an experiment because you can't have nothing. The universe does exist. But let's suppose, if you could take maybe a huge vacuum chamber, totally devoid of anything, and you could seal it, in a lead vault under a mountain where it couldn't be acted on by any rays, or I don't know, you couldn't do it, but do the best you can. If you can get it to create even one drop of water and one grain of sand, then you will have my absolute attention. Daniel.
Vacuum spontaneously generate particles.
I'm aware of the theory.
It's quantum mechanics.
Daniel,
It's the most verified theory we have, that in general relativity.
And they disappear immediately.
Unless you're by a black hole. But,
If you can show me a grain of sand or a drop of water created itself.
Just say nothing, and virtual particles are a thing.
Virtual. I've read all the work. I'll just tell you I find it quite unconvincing because no one can show you any of the existence of anything from this.
We see the effects.
Okay, I'm gonna have to cut it there. Daniel, we can talk about. I have read every bit of this material. Show me a grain of sand or a drop of water that exists spontaneously. And I'm not the only one.
I just want to
Yeah.
balance to the claims.
Yes. No, and I'm by constraints of time. Yeah. My statement stands. Show me even a grain of sand or a drop of water, or one molecule of oxygen that was created spontaneously that I can see, and we've got a universe to explain. But I have these questions also for Professor Hawking. He said, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe will create itself. Well, I do have one question. If there was nothing, how was there a law such as gravity? It's a fair question. Where's the support for this? Again, lots of great experimental work trying to look at this, but it still remains unsupported. And I'll show you something in a moment from Professor from Hawking's words, etc. Where is the evidence of any type? Because we do not observe this phenomenon occurring. Where would be the reason to believe that this is true? I'll leave it with you, and there's a lot more reading you can do on it. But I'm not finding a reason to believe that. Now, well, I'll say more in a minute because I do want to be fair about this. Wow. All right, well, let's go back and look at some other ones. How about the creation or superior entity hypothesis? That such an entity created this. All right, so that's the other major one we need to consider. Now, I have to tell you this: most of the atheistic world chooses that one I showed you in the middle. Most do not accept Hawking's theory that it created itself because they don't find that tenable. Again, it's not a vote. But most atheistic believers inclined towards science will say, yeah, there is no God. However, there was a beginning. There was a Big Bang, and that's really good science to say that there was. And they'll simply say, we don't have a theory right now to explain what caused the Big Bang. Okay, you know what? That's honest. I'll consider that. That's honest. If you'll say, okay, yeah, you can say, I don't think there's a God, but you say, okay, the Big Bang happened and we really don't know what caused it. Well, that doesn't help me explain it, but at least it's an honest claim. So I'll take that seriously. But if we want to compare those on a scorecard, let's take a look at it. Creation, spontaneous appearance as per Stephen Hawking, or no creation, but no theory to explain. Okay, are they testable? No, none of them. So by strictest definition, none of these hypotheses are science, by strictest definition. This one I say and not applicable because you can't test it because there is no theory. There is no prevailing theory to test, okay? But it wouldn't be testable if there were. Is it directly observable as to what caused the Big Bang to happen? No. There is no direct observation possible of this. So even by a generous definition of science, none of these are scientific. So if somebody wants to say, oh, we only consider science, well, then you can't consider any of these. Is it compatible with known phenomena? This one, for the reasons I said a while ago, I'm going to tell you my conclusion, and y'all let you do your own reading on this, that the idea that it spontaneously created itself is not compatible with known phenomena and known science. What about there's no God, but we don't know? Well, you can't evaluate that because there's no theory to evaluate. So is it compatible? I don't know. I'm hoping somebody will come up with a good theory there because I look forward to giving it fair consideration. Now, is it falsifiable? Is there a way to disprove it? And that would be kind of a combination of all three of these broad categories here. No, there's really no way to falsify or disprove any of those. And that's a problem. It's just a reality. It's not a problem. You can't disprove, much less prove any of the above without some other confirmation. Okay, so we may have to figure out the answers to the other three questions and then see what makes sense on this one. But for where we are right now, each one of those involves something that's beyond human understanding, possibly something eternal. I mean, any of those theories, they are by definition beyond human grasp. So I think you have to take a look at which one makes the most sense. I do have to say, when there is no serious atheistic theory to consider here for how it happened, okay, again, I take that as honest. I'm okay with that. But I could give it more credibility if somebody would propose a really workable theory for how that happened. Give me something to consider. So which has explanatory power? That is to say, based on what we have on this, which one of those can do the best job explaining the fact that the universe with its matter and energy exists? And here's what I have to say on that. Professor Hawking's theory has no explanatory power because it contradicts known phenomena. I can't say that it's the most sensible explanation. And again, not that it's a vote, it's not a vote, but neither do almost any of Professor Hawking's peers say that, yep, you should believe that. That explains it. This one, the idea that no, it wasn't a God, but we don't know how it happened, well, that doesn't have any explanatory power. It could be true, but there's nothing convincing about it. When there is no theory to consider, it can't explain things at the moment. The creation hypothesis, you may not like it, you may not think it's true, but it does, if true, explain what we see, which is more at the moment than I can say for the others. Now, I do not discount this. The fact that there's not a theory yet doesn't mean that there won't be a good one, and I look forward to it. But that kind of then would bring us to the next question. All right, the universe does exist with all its matter and energy, but we're talking about a random explosion, and in what we see, a very precisely ordered universe. Next week, I'm going to give you a break from this. You definitely deserve a break from this. So next week, we're going to take just a 1 week hiatus from this, and we're going to talk about where are the dead. Now, I know that should have been today, right? Where are the dead? Because they'll be asking you for candy later on today, etc. But we're going to do that next week, and then the week after that, we will pick this discussion up again if you can stand it. But I think it will continue to get a little bit more interesting each time. I hope that's useful, though, as a start. The better stuff lies ahead. I know I keep saying that. Okay, that's just an excuse because I'm boring. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a great week ahead.